If someone had told me that the most important lesson of my life would come from a man holding a broom, I would have laughed. But life doesn't knock before entering. It just arrives, uninvited, unfiltered, undeniable. And that morning, life arrived wrapped in dust, sweat, and the soft rhythm of a broom sliding across concrete. The sun had barely touched the horizon when I stormed out of my apartment. Jaw tight, chest heavy, hands trembling with the kind of anger that quickly turns into exhaustion if you carry it too long. Another rejection. Another email that politely said everything except what I needed to hear. Another reminder that the world didn't care how hard I tried, or how late I stayed up, or how much of myself I had poured into something. I felt small, invisible, replaceable, and as I walked toward the office, each step felt like dragging a chain. The chain of expectations, failures, comparisons, all tied to my ankle. That's when I saw him, a street sweeper, bent slightly forward, pushing an old broom across a sidewalk littered with wrappers and yesterday's regrets. His uniform was faded, his shoes worn, his hat crooked. He looked like someone life had pushed around. Yet somehow he stood with a strange, peaceful dignity. I had no reason to notice him, except he was humming, softly, calmly, a quiet melody floating in the air like he wasn't just cleaning a street. He was composing a morning. I frowned. How could someone doing that job be happy? My chest tightened even more. Must be nice, I muttered under my breath, to have such a simple life. But he heard me. He paused mid-sweep, looked up and smiled. An old, sincere smile that felt like he had seen storms far worse than mine. Simple, he repeated. His voice carried a rasp, like it had been sanded down by years of wind and hardship. My friend, nothing about life is simple, not even this. I didn't respond. I was too wrapped in my own bitterness to recognize the moment life offered me. He studied my face, not with judgment, not with pity, but with the quiet accuracy of someone who had learned to read pain like a map. You look tired, he said gently. Not the body, the heart. I forced a laugh. Heart tired. Yes, that's one way to put it. He nodded slowly, resumed sweeping, and spoke without looking at me. Come. Walk with me. I'll give you a story. No charge. I almost kept walking. I had a job to get to, deadlines, pressure, responsibilities. But something about the way he said story made me stop. My life felt too loud, too fast, too heavy. And he seemed like someone who moved at a different frequency, a quieter one I desperately needed. So I followed. He started. When I was young, I believed what you believe now, that life should reward effort. That if you try hard enough, you deserve success. That struggle guarantees progress. He tapped his broom lightly against the pavement. But the world, it doesn't run on the math you think it does. I crossed my arms. That's comforting. He chuckled softly. Comfort isn't the goal. Truth is. We turned a corner. His broom brushed a dry leaf aside like it was a memory. You think your fight is special, he said. That the universe is singling you out. That you're alone in your failure. But failure, it visits everyone. Like morning, like dust. No one escapes. I felt heat rising in my chest. Easy for you to say. You don't know what I've been through. He stopped again. Looked at me with eyes that carried 1,000 unspoken chapters. You don't know what I've been through either. Silence. He leaned on his broom. I wasn't always a street sweeper, he said. There was a time I wore suits. A time I signed contracts, not sidewalks. A time people listened when I spoke. My eyebrows lifted despite myself. What happened? He inhaled deeply. Life, he said simply. It broke what I thought was unbreakable. A mistake, a miscalculation, a partnership I trusted too much. Overnight, I lost everything. His voice didn't crack, but something inside it trembled. My house, my savings, my confidence. Even my family drifted away, because poverty is a room people don't like to enter. I swallowed. Suddenly the air felt heavier. So how did you end up here? I asked. He smiled, not sadly but knowingly. That's the thing. I didn't end up here. I chose here. I stared at him like he was speaking in riddles. He continued, when you lose everything, you learn what wasn't real to begin with. Titles, illusions. Wealth, temporary. Reputation, fragile. But work, something done with your own hands, that stays honest. He swept another handful of dust into a pile. This job gave me back my mornings, my dignity, my peace. The world no longer had control over me. It didn't have the power to disappoint me anymore. I blinked. Disappoint you? Yes, he said. When you expect life to go a certain way, you suffer. When you let go of the script you wrote in your head, you start living the life you have. His words hit like a quiet earthquake. I suddenly realized how tightly I had been gripping my own expectations, like a rope burning my palms, forcing life to match the picture I had drawn for myself. He noticed my silence. Tell me, he said softly, what is it you feel you're losing? I hesitated, but the street was empty, and his presence felt strangely safe. Everything, I whispered. My effort isn't working. My dreams feel further every day, and I'm scared I'll never become someone. The street sweeper gave the smallest nod, as if he had heard this fear 1,000 times from 1,000 different faces. My friend, he said, becoming someone doesn't happen when the world finally claps for you. It happens quietly, on days when you get up even though your heart is tired, on mornings you show up even when no one sees, on nights when fear tells you to quit but you keep going anyway. He pointed the broom at my chest. You're not failing. You're forging. A strange warmth spread inside me, like a truth I had forgotten was being returned. But he wasn't finished. You think success is the destination, he said. But success is only the shadow cast by a consistent heart. A shadow appears when you move forward. But you've been standing still, staring at the ground, wondering why no shadow forms. My breath caught. He was right. I had stopped moving. Not physically, emotionally. Fear had paralyzed me. Comparison had drained me. Disappointment had convinced me I wasn't enough. He nudged my arm gently. You must walk, even when the path feels invisible. I exhaled shakily. You talk like a philosopher. He laughed. A warm, deep, human sound. No. Just a man who has swept enough streets to understand that dust always returns. But so does morning. My chest loosened for the first time in months. We walked in silence for a few moments. His broom whispering softly, my thoughts rearranging themselves like scattered pages finding order. Then he said something that anchored itself inside me. Remember this, you do not rise when life becomes easier. You rise when you become stronger. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I didn't see a street sweeper. I saw a survivor, a thinker, a mentor shaped by loss, not defeated by it. A man who had learned truths no classroom could teach. And somehow, I knew my life was about to change. I didn't want the moment to end. Something about this man, his calmness, his clarity, felt like standing near a warm fire after wandering in a cold forest for too long. But life, as always, had more to reveal. He gestured toward a small bench near the corner of an old bakery. Sit, he said with a gentle command. You're carrying too much weight to keep walking. He said, not because he insisted, but because he was right. He leaned the broom against the bench and lowered himself beside me. Up close, I noticed the lines on his face. They weren't signs of age. They were signatures of resilience, etched over years of surviving storms. He turned slightly toward me. Tell me, he said, what is the thing you're chasing that's making you this tired? Success, I admitted. Or whatever version of it I'm supposed to have by now. He nodded slowly, as if he had heard that word misused far too often. Define it, he said. I blinked. What do you mean? Everyone wants success, he replied. But very few can explain what their version actually looks like. How can you chase something you can't describe? I tried to answer, but the words knotted in my throat. Was success money? Recognition? Stability? Freedom? Proving myself? Proving others wrong? Each answer felt too small and too big at the same time. I don't know, I whispered. He smiled in a way that felt almost like relief. That's why you suffer, he said. You're running without direction. Running exhausts you. But clarity guides you. His voice lowered. Let me tell you something I learned too late. He placed his hand gently on the broom's wooden handle, as though it grounded him. Success is not a mountain you climb. It is the valley you walk through. Because a mountain is seen by others, but a valley is understood only by you. I frowned. I don't understand. He turned toward the street, watching the morning unfold. People admire mountaintops, achievements, trophies, victories, but no one asks about the valleys, the days of doubt, the nights of fear, the moments you break quietly. He looked at me again. And yet, that is where you grow. Not up there. He pointed to an imaginary summit. Down here, he tapped the ground. A soft wind rustled through the street. A bakery worker flipped the sign to open. The world continued its ordinary routine. But something inside me was shifting. He continued, I used to measure my worth with numbers. Income, deals, assets, attention. And when I lost them, I believed I had lost myself. His voice tightened ever so slightly. Then one morning, sweeping this same street, I realized something. He paused. Value doesn't disappear. It only changes form. I turned the words over in my mind. He leaned closer. You're not failing, he said. You're transitioning. And transitions feel like losing, but they are actually becoming. A quiet ache welled up inside me. Then why does it hurt this much? I asked. He chuckled softly. Because you think pain is a warning. He shook his head. But pain is a teacher. And teachers appear when you're ready, not when you're comfortable. I stared at the cracked sidewalk beneath my shoes. Sometimes I feel like I'm running out of time, I murmured. No, he said firmly. You're running out of patience. Time is still with you. It walks at your pace. It isn't your enemy. He watched my expression soften. Then he added, Do you know why I sweep streets with a smile? I shook my head. Because I no longer live for tomorrow. I live for, right now, this moment, this breath, this broom, this sunrise. He inhaled deeply, letting the air fill his lungs with quiet gratitude. I spent years chasing a life that ran faster than me. A life that never paused long enough for me to feel present. He turned to me again. Now I choose a life that doesn't outrun my soul. Something inside me cracked open. Not in a painful way, but in the way a seed cracks before it becomes something new. I swallowed. So what do I do? My voice was barely above a whisper. How do I get out of this feeling that I'm stuck between who I am and who I'm supposed to be? He tapped the bench beside him. You start small, he said. You start human. What does that mean? It means you stop sprinting and start breathing. You stop chasing and start choosing. You stop demanding from yourself and start listening to yourself. He pointed to his chest again. The world will always scream expectations. Your heart will only whisper truth. You must learn to hear the whisper. A long silence stretched between us. The kind of silence that heals instead of harms. Then he said something I will never forget. When a wound is healing, it itches. Your soul is itching right now. That means you're healing, not failing. My eyes burned, and I blinked quickly. He pretended not to notice. After a moment, he stood up, picked up his broom, and adjusted his hat. I should get back to work, he said lightly. This street won't clean itself. A wave of panic rose in me. Wait, I didn't even get your name. He laughed softly, walking away. Names don't matter, he said without turning back. Lessons do. I watched him gently push the broom forward. A man who seemed to guide not just dust, but the lost pieces of strangers who crossed his path. Something pulled me to my feet. Will I see you again? I called out. He paused mid-step. Depends, he said. On what? He looked over his shoulder, eyes warm and wise. On whether you keep looking for the world to guide you, or finally learn to guide yourself. Then he turned the corner and disappeared. I stood alone on the street, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. His words echoed inside me like distant bells. You're not failing. You're forging. Success is a valley, not a mountain. Pain is a teacher. You are not running out of time. Your soul is healing. You must learn to hear the whisper. I walked slowly toward my office, but something had changed. The buildings looked less threatening. The morning air felt softer. My thoughts weren't attacking me. They were unfolding. For weeks, months even, I had believed I was breaking. But maybe I was reshaping. Maybe the pressure wasn't punishment, but preparation. Maybe the street sweeper wasn't sent to fix my life, but to remind me that I was capable of fixing it myself. As I reached the glass doors of my office building, my reflection stared back at me. For the first time, I didn't see failure. I didn't see someone falling behind, or someone disappointing the world. I saw someone in transition, someone learning, someone becoming, and maybe that was enough. I placed my hand on the door, but paused, not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood something so simple, so powerful, so easily missed. Life isn't a race. It's a rhythm, and I had been running out of tune. I took a deep breath, a real one that reached all the way inside. And with a new sense of quiet strength, I whispered to myself, I'm not lost. I'm learning to walk again. The street sweeper never returned to that corner. Or maybe he did, and I simply never needed to see him again. But his lesson stayed. Every time I felt overwhelmed, I remembered his calmness. Every time I doubted myself, I remembered his eyes, steady, gentle, knowing. Every time I feared I wasn't enough, I remembered his words. You do not rise when life becomes easier. You rise when you become stronger. And slowly, quietly, patiently, I did. Not because the world changed, but because I did. I stopped chasing timelines that weren't mine. I stopped measuring my days by achievements. I stopped comparing my life to others' highlight reels. I stopped expecting success to look like a mountain. I began treating every day like a valley, rich, deep, fertile, full of unseen growth. I learned to show up without needing applause. I learned to rest without guilt. I learned to dream without fear. I learned to walk without running. I learned to listen, really listen, to the whisper of my own heart. And one day, long after the dust of my old life had settled, I finally understood why that man smiled as he swept the street. Because he had made peace with where he was, and who he was, and that peace made him powerful. Today, I try to do the same. And if you ever feel tired, lost, forgotten, disappointed, or stuck between who you are and who you want to be, remember this: you don't need a title to be valuable. You don't need applause to matter. You don't need to climb to rise. You don't need success to be someone. Sometimes, your greatest mentor is someone the world walks past without seeing. And sometimes, the wisdom you need most comes from the quietest voice, spoken by someone holding a broom, on an ordinary morning, when life decides you're finally ready to hear it.